Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're plunging into, well, how our minds actually work. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
We've gathered some great material, mostly drawing from Daniel Kahneman's really influential book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Right. And our goal here is to kind of unpack the core ideas about how we think, link it these two ways. Kahneman talks about the fast, intuitive one.
System one.
System one, right.
Yeah.
And then the slower, more deliberate, logical one.
System two. Yeah, the idea is to give you a bit of a shortcut, really, to understanding what drives your judgments, your decisions, often without you even realizing it.
Exactly. We want to dig into some of the, frankly, surprising things about how we form thoughts, make choices, and hopefully give you some insights you can actually use, day to day without getting totally bogged down in jargon. Okay, so let's get into it. One of the first things that struck me was this idea that our normal everyday language just isn't quite enough to really understand judgment, like a mechanic needing more than just a basic wrench.
That's a great analogy. Yeah. Just like that mechanic needs specialized tools for complex engines, we need a richer vocabulary, specific terms, to really get a handle on our own cognitive processes.
So these terms, these labels, they help us see patterns.
Precisely. They let us identify predictable patterns in how we think, patterns that might otherwise just fly under the radar.
Which brings us to this concept of informed gossip. Sounds intriguing. Is it about spotting these predictable mistakes people make, these biases?
Yeah, that's basically it. Recognizing these systematic errors, these biases, and understanding how they actually play out. The book uses the halo effect as a prime example.
The halo effect. I think I know this one. It's like when someone's confident, you just assume they're competent at everything else, too.
Exactly. That initial positive impression, maybe confidence, maybe attractiveness, it just spills over. It colors your judgment of their other qualities, even completely unrelated ones.
And it's surprising how much that one thing can sway your whole view.
It really is. And having that label halo effect helps you, well, anticipate it, maybe spot it when it's happening in yourself or others, and just understand its influence, which is often pretty subtle.
Okay, so these labels are like mental tools. Got it. Now, another big one was the availability heuristic. What's that telling us about quick judgments?
Oh, availability. It's a mental shortcut, basically. We judge how likely something is or how common it is based on how easily examples spring to mind.
So if I can think of it easily, I assume it happens a lot.
That's the crux of it. If recall is effortless, we tend to overestimate frequency or probability. And the surprising part, our perception can be totally skewed, like completely detached from actual statistics, often driven by media coverage or just vivid memories.
The book used the letter K example, didn't it? Why is that a good illustration?
Right, the K example.
Yeah.
So people generally think K is more likely to be the first letter of a word than the third. Why?
Because it's easier to think of words starting with K, king, kitchen.
Exactly. King, kangaroo, kitchen. Much easier than thinking of words with K as the third letter, like ask or bake. Even though statistically...
K is more common in the third position.
That's right. Statistically, K shows up more often as the third letter. But because starting words are easier to retrieve, we rely on that ease, that availability, and make the wrong judgment.
Okay, that clicks. It's like thinking plane crashes are a bigger risk than, say, diabetes, just because crashes are so vivid in the news.
Precisely. Dramatic, emotionally charged events stick in our memory. They're highly available. So we overestimate their likelihood, even when the actual numbers show far more common, less dramatic risks.
So our gut can be useful, but these shortcuts, they can definitely lead us wrong. Still, the sources do talk about the marvels of intuition, especially expert intuition. When can we trust that gut feeling?
Well, intuition, particularly for experienced professionals, isn't magic. Herbert Simon put it really well. Intuition is nothing more and nothing less than recognition.
Recognition,
Yeah.
Meaning pattern matching.
Exactly. Think of a chess master instantly seeing a winning move. It's not psychic power. It's thousands of hours of practice burning patterns into their memory. Those patterns act as cues, unlocking stored knowledge almost instantly.
Like an experienced doctor diagnosing something subtle.
Precisely. Or a firefighter knowing instinctively where the danger lies. It seems miraculous, but it's built on deep, learned expertise. That's the surprising part. The seemingly effortless insight comes from immense practice.
So deep pattern recognition. But even then, it's not foolproof, is it? The sources mention attention is still key.
Absolutely correct. Even with finely tuned intuition, you still need focus. If your attention is elsewhere or you're distracted, even the best intuition can fail. It's a reminder that even System 1 needs some level of presence.
Okay, Let's switch gears to the other side, the effortful system two. What kinds of things really need this slower, more analytical approach?
System 2 kicks in for tasks that don't come naturally, things requiring real mental effort, like searching your memory for something specific, say all the poems you know that mention roses.
Or comparing two washing machines with lots of different features.
Exactly. Or the example used, driving on the left side of the road for the first time, if you're used to the right, these things demand conscious attention, sustained effort.
And this effort, it's not just a feeling, it has physical signs. The pupil dilation stuff was remarkable.
Oh, yeah, that research is fascinating. They found that when people do mentally demanding tasks, like holding several digits in memory, their pupils actually dilate, sometimes up to 50% bigger in the first few seconds.
Wow. So your eyes literally show how hard your brain is working.
Pretty much. That dilation, often along with a slightly faster heart rate, is a measurable sign of cognitive load. It's like a physical window into the mental work being done. It's quite something.
And they said when people hit their limit, or just gave up, the pupils stopped dilating or shrunk back.
That's right. Pupil size tracked engagement very closely. As long as you were trying, pupils stayed wide. The second you solved it or decided to quit, they went back to normal. It's like a switch flips.
Incredible, almost like a visible mental energy gauge.
Right.
And this connects to that famous invisible gorilla experiment, doesn't it? The limits of attention.
Yes, perfectly. The gorilla experiment is such a striking demo of affective blindness. People focus so intensely on one task, counting basketball passes, they completely miss something bizarre and obvious, like a guy in a gorilla suit walking through the middle.
Because all their mental bandwidth is used up.
Exactly. And interestingly, the pattern of failing to see the gorilla mirrored that inverted V pattern of pupil dilation during intense effort. It really drives home how limited our attentional budget is.
Okay, so we have these two systems. System one, fast, intuitive, automatic. System two, slow, deliberate, effortful. What are the core differences and what they're good at?
Well, System 2 is essential when you need to follow specific rules like, say, tax instructions, or compare things across multiple dimensions, make deliberate choices, deal with statistics. System 1. It's great at recognizing simple relationships, integrating info about one thing, but it struggles with multiple distinct topics or pure stats. Like, System 1 might quickly think someone looks like a librarian.
Right, based on a stereotype.
But it takes System 2 to remember, hang on, there are way more farmers than librarians overall, to consider the base rate.
Exactly. System 2 has to step in to integrate that statistical fact with the stereotype impression.
And System 2 also handles these task sets, right? Overriding habits, like consciously counting Fs on a page.
Precisely. Adopting a task set means programming your working memory with specific instructions, even if they go against your automatic habits. Counting Fs requires deliberate focus, suppressing the urge to just read normally. That's executive control, mainly handled by the prefrontal cortex.
Okay. Now, given System 2 is so effortful, it makes sense we try to avoid using it too much, this law of least effort. Yeah, the law of least effort. It just describes our natural tendency to, well, take the path of least mental resistance. We avoid cognitive overload by breaking things down and by relying on System 1 whenever it seems good enough. It's not pure laziness, it's efficiency, really.
Which explains why focusing on one complex thought can be hard, why we get distracted easily. Our brain wants the easier route.
That's a big part of it. Sustained, effortful thinking, even without external pressure, takes real mental discipline. Our default is often to drift towards less demanding thoughts or activities.
And this limited pool of mental energy connects to ego depletion from Roy Baumeister's work.
Yes, ego depletion.
Yeah.
Baumeister's research suggests that all kinds of voluntary effort, cognitive, like solving puzzles, emotional, like stifling laughter, even physical self-control, draw from the same limited pool of mental energy.
Like a shared fuel tank.
Kind of, yeah. Using self-control in one area makes it harder, temporarily, to exert self-control in a totally different area, like a muscle getting tired.
The examples were good. Suppressing emotions makes you give up sooner on a physical task. Resisting cookies makes you worse at solving puzzles later. That connection is surprising.
It is surprising, but the findings are pretty consistent. Exerting effort in one domain really does seem to deplete a general resource needed for self-regulation in other domains. It highlights that willpower isn't unlimited.
So sometimes opting for the easy answer isn't just lack of motivation. It could be genuine mental fatigue. But the sources also distinguish between being intellectually lazy versus engaged.
That's an important point. Ego depletion is temporary, but some people have more of a general tendency to avoid effortful thought. Lazy thinkers, in this sense, just accept plausible-sounding answers without much scrutiny.
Whereas engaged thinkers are more active, skeptical.
Right. More curious, more willing to question their intuitions, more likely to invest the effort for deeper analysis. Keith Stanovich calls them more rational.
And Shane Frederick's cognitive reflection test that measures this tendency, the impulsivity versus reflection.
Yes, that test is designed to do just that. It has these tricky questions where the intuitive answer is wrong, and you need to engage System 2 to override it and find the correct one. It's a good indicator of someone's tendency to rely on System 1 versus engaging System 2.
Okay, let's shift to how thoughts get linked. Associative activation, how seeing one word triggers a whole network. The vomit and hazelnut example was memorable.
Ah, yes, memorable indeed. It shows how fast and automatic this is. Those two words, even without a direct link, instantly trigger a whole cascade of related ideas, memories, feelings, maybe mild disgust or surprise. And it happens mostly unconsciously.
This vast web of connections. And that leads to priming, right? Where seeing one thing influences what comes to mind next.
Yeah.
Like eat makes you think of e-soup.
Exactly. Eat primes soup, wash primes soap. Exposure to an idea makes related concepts more accessible, more easily evoked for a short time afterwards. It's another subtle, often unconscious influence on our thoughts and even behavior.
It all seems connected to this idea of cognitive ease versus strain, like a mental comfort meter.
Yeah, you can think of it like a dial. Easy means things are flowing smoothly, familiar, coherent, no obvious threats or problems, often feels good. Strained means there's a problem, something unexpected, or a task needing System 2 effort. Feels less comfortable.
And this feeling of ease or strain actually influences our judgment, without us realizing.
That's the surprising part, yes. Cognitive ease acts as a cue. If something feels easy to process, we're more likely to believe it's true, familiar, good, and effortless. Strain signals the opposite. Maybe something is wrong, unfamiliar, needs more scrutiny.
Which brings us to illusions of remembering, how familiarity can trick us. The David Stenbill study.
Right, the Becoming Famous Overnight study. They showed people a list of non-famous names like David Stenbill. Later, they showed them another list with some real minor celebrities and David Stenbill again.
And people thought Stenbill was famous just because his name felt familiar from the first list.
Exactly. They didn't consciously remember why it was familiar. They just had that feeling of, I've seen this name before. That sense of familiarity got mistaken for actual fame. It shows our feeling of knowing isn't always reliable.
So familiarity doesn't equal truth. And repetition makes things feel familiar, which is why repeating lies can make them seem believable.
Precisely. Repetition creates cognitive ease. That ease feels like familiarity, and familiarity feels like truth, especially if you can't recall the original source. Even repeating just part of a false statement can make the whole thing feel more true later on.
Wow, okay, what about mood? How does being in a good or bad mood affect which system 1 or 2 is in charge?
There's a really strong link. A good mood tends to make us rely more on System 1, more intuitive, creative, but also maybe a bit more gullible, less analytical. System 2 relaxes its guard a bit.
Because a good mood signals things are safe, no need for high alert.
That seems to be the logic, yeah. Conversely, a bad mood often engages System 2 more. We become more vigilant, suspicious, analytical, detail-focused. It's like a signal that something might be wrong, so pay closer attention.
So our emotional state kind of tunes which thinking system we favor. Interesting. Cognitive ease feels good, and good feelings promote cognitive ease. It's a loop.
It seems to be, yes. They influence each other.
Now, norm theory, how an unexpected event changes what seems normal afterwards. The soup-wincing guest example.
Right, so one guest unexpectedly winces at the soup. That violates the norm. Then, if another guest shows even a slight negative reaction, it might seem more normal than it would have otherwise, because System 1 has already adjusted its model of the situation to accommodate the first weird event. It's constructing a new, temporary norm on the fly.
Our minds are constantly trying to make sense of things, build a coherent story, even if it means shifting our baseline for what's typical.
And this drive for coherence is powerful, especially in how we perceive cause and effect, like in that Heider and Simmel film with the shapes.
Oh yeah, the moving triangles and circle. People see intentions, personalities.
Irresistibly. They describe bullies, victims, emotions, goals, all projected onto simple geometric shapes moving around. It shows how deeply ingrained our tendency is to see agents and infer intentions, even when there are none. It's quite surprising how automatic that is.
We're wired to see purpose, which maybe connects to the idea of a gullible System 1 and how System 2 acts as a filter, but only if it's not busy.
That links to Daniel Gilbert's research suggesting our default reaction is to believe information first. Understanding is believing initially. Doubting, unbelieving that requires effort from System 2.
So if System 2 is overloaded, tired, or just lazy, we're more likely to accept things as true.
That's the idea. System 1 accepts. System 2 questions. If System 2 isn't actively engaged, we're much more susceptible to believing, well, almost anything. It highlights the importance of critical thinking, which is a System 2 job.
Which leads right into one of the biggest ideas, WYSIOD. What you see is all there is. System 1 jumping to conclusions based on limited info.
WYSIOD is fundamental. System 1 works with the information it has right now and builds the best, most coherent story it can from that limited data. It doesn't naturally stop and ask, wait, what information am I missing?
Like the will Mindic be a good leader? She's intelligent and strong. Example. We hear those two things and instantly think yes.
Right. We form a quick impression based only on what's presented. What is the next piece of information is that she's also cruel and corrupt. System 1 has already jumped, and it takes System 2 effort to adjust that initial coherent story. That quick coherence is the surprise.
And the David Thornton legal case example, seeing only one side of the evidence, makes us form an opinion, even if we know it's incomplete.
Exactly. What you see shapes your immediate judgment. We don't automatically compensate for missing information. That's the power and the danger of WISIOD. It makes for quick thinking, but also opens the door to biases.
And this happens partly because System 1 is always doing these basic assessments in the background, the mental shotgun idea.
Yeah, the mental shotgun. When System 2 intends to answer one specific question, System 1 often computes a bunch of other related things automatically, including these basic assessments like similarity, causality, or even, say, judging competence from a face.
Judging competence from a face, like whether someone looks strong or trustworthy.
Right. Even if those facial features don't actually predict competence well, System 1 makes that assessment anyway, and it can unconsciously influence the answer to the original, more complex question System 2 was trying to address. It's an automatic byproduct.
Like our brain is spraying related calculations everywhere, not just hitting the specific target.
That's a good way to put it. These automatic assessments form the basis for many heuristics and biases.
We also touched on how System 1 handles sets and prototypes, like quickly grasping the average length of lines.
Yes, it's remarkably good at computing averages or prototypes effortlessly. We sense the norm of a set almost instantly, without needing System 2 to crunch the numbers.
Efficient. But this can also lead to the focusing illusion, especially when judging happiness.
Right. Absolutely. If you ask someone, say, how happy are you with your dating life? And then immediately ask, how happy are you overall? The first question heavily influences the second.
Because their dating life is now what they see. It's the focus.
Exactly. WISIOD applied to happiness judgments. Whatever aspect of life you're currently focused on looms disproportionately large in your overall assessment of well-being, even if it's not usually the biggest factor.
It distorts the picture. And this ties into the affect heuristic, too, how our feelings, our likes and dislikes drive judgments.
Yes, Paul Soloveitch's affect heuristic. Basically, we often let our emotional response, do I like this or dislike this, determine our judgments about risks and benefits. If we like something, we tend to see high benefits and low risks. If we dislike it, low benefits, high risks.
So the conclusion often comes before the rational arguments, driven by the feeling.
Very often, yes, especially when emotions are involved. Our feelings provide a quick shortcut, but one that can bypass careful analysis of the actual evidence.
Okay, let's dive into some specific biases. The belief in the law of small numbers. The kidney cancer example was striking.
Ah, yes. Finding that counties with the lowest kidney cancer rates are often rural, sparsely populated, and Republican. It's tempting to jump to causal explanations, cleaner living, maybe.
But the twist is that counties with the highest rates are often also rural, sparsely populated, and Republican.
Exactly. The key is sparsely populated. Small samples yield extreme results much more often than large samples, purely due to chance. Both the very lowest and very highest rates are more likely found in small populations.
So our intuition to find a cause is misled by random variation in small numbers. We expect small samples to perfectly reflect the larger population, which is statistically wrong.
That's the belief in the law of small numbers. Our intuition fails us with statistics. The advice is clear. Distrust statistical intuitions about small samples, rely on calculation instead. The surprising thing is how strong that flawed intuition is.
And this links to our general struggle with randomness. We seek causes everywhere, right? even in random sequences like coin flips or baby births.
Our associative machinery is desperate for causes. It struggles to accept that some things just happen by chance without a neat explanation. Statistical thinking requires considering what could have happened but didn't, which doesn't come naturally.
Which explains why people believe in things like the hot hand in basketball. Even when studies show it's mostly random streaks, we see patterns where there's just noise.
Precisely. We're pattern detectors, sometimes over-detectors. This has big implications for evaluating performance, like in business or investing. We're too eager to label random success or failure as skill or incompetence.
Okay, another big one. The anchoring effect. How even random numbers influence our estimates. The UN nations example.
Right. If you first spin a wheel of fortune that lands on, say, 65, and then you're asked to estimate the percentage of African nations in the UN, your estimate will likely be higher than if the wheel had landed on 10.
Even though the wheel number is totally irrelevant?
Totally irrelevant. But that initial number acts as an anchor, pulling your judgment towards it. It's a surprisingly powerful effect of suggestion.
And the sources explain it as a priming effect. The anchor makes related thoughts more accessible.
Yes. The anchor selectively evokes compatible evidence through associative coherence. If I ask you if Gandhi died before or after age 114, that absurdly high number makes you think of him as very old, anchoring your final estimate higher than it might otherwise be. System 1 tries to make the anchor plausible.
That's subtle but powerful. How does this connect to risk perception, along with availability and effect?
Well, research shows public perception of risk often deviates significantly from expert statistical assessments. Risks that are easily available in memory due to media coverage vividness and evoke strong negative feelings, affect heuristic, are often perceived as much more frequent or dangerous than less available, less emotionally charged risks.
Like fearing terrorism more than common diseases.
That can be an example, yes. Dramatic, publicized events anchor our fear and seem more available. This can lead to availability cascades.
Cascades.
Yeah.
Like a chain reaction.
Exactly. A minor event gets media attention, generates public concern, fueled by availability and affect, leading to more media coverage, more concern.
Yeah.
It can snowball, potentially leading to policy decisions based more on public fear than objective risk analysis. Love Canal was mentioned as a possible case.
So there's this tension between expert data and public emotion.
Yeah.
In how we handle risk.
A constant tension, yes.
Okay, let's talk about judging similarity.
Yeah.
The representativeness heuristic. The Tom W. example. Ranking grad specializations.
Tom W. People are given a personality sketch, nerdy, likes order, not very social, and asked to rank fields Tom is likely in, based on both likelihood and similarity to the stereotype of each field.
And people rank based on similarity, right? He sounds like an engineer or computer scientist stereotype.
Exactly. They judge probability based on how much Tom represents or resembles the stereotype. They focus on the description matching the stereotype.
And ignore.
They ignore the base rates. The fact that there might be many, many more students in, say, humanities or education than in computer science. Similarity judgments aren't affected by base rates, but probability judgments absolutely should be.
That's base rate neglect, again, driven by representativeness. We focus on the specific description and ignore the background statistics. Why do we do that?
Sometimes we think the specific info makes the base rate irrelevant. Other times, it's just System 2 being lazy, not putting in the effort to combine the stereotype match with the statistical odds. Interestingly, making people frown, inducing cognitive strain, sometimes makes them pay more attention to base rates.
Frowning makes you more statistically minded. That's unexpected. Okay, this leads to the famous conjunction fallacy and Linda the bank teller.
Linda, described as bright, outspoken, concerned with social justice. Then people are asked which is more probable. A, Linda's a bank teller, or B, Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement.
And most people choose B.
Overwhelmingly, even though logically B is a subset of A, everyone who fits description B also fits description A, so A must be more probable.
But B seems more representative of Linda's description.
Exactly. It creates a more coherent, representative story based on the description. Intuition, representativeness, clashes directly with logic, probability rules. It's a powerful demonstration of how heuristics can lead to logical errors. Even when it's explained, the intuitive pull of B remains strong for many.
It really highlights that conflict between plausibility and probability. Now, the sources also mentioned causal base rates versus statistical base rates. We use base rates more if they feel causal, the cab example.
Right, the blue versus green tab hit and run. If you're told 85% of cabs in the city are green and 15% are blue, statistical base rate, and a witness identifies the cab as blue but is known to be unreliable, people tend to underweight the base rate and overweight the witness.
But if you frame the base rate causally, like green cabs are involved in 85% of accidents because they have more reckless drivers,
then people are much more likely to use that base rate information. Causal stories are easier for System 1 to grasp and integrate than abstract statistical facts.
makes sense. We love causes. Which brings us to regression to the mean. This often looks like cause and effect, but isn't. The flight instructor example.
Yes. The instructor notices that when he praises a pilot for an exceptionally smooth landing, the next landing is usually worse. And when he yells at someone for a terrible landing, the next one is usually better.
So he concludes praise is bad and yelling is good.
He concludes that, yes, but he's likely observing regression to the mean. An unusually good performance is likely to be followed by a more average one, and an unusually bad one is also likely to be followed by one closer to average just due to random fluctuations. The praise and yelling might have little effect. It's the statistics playing out.
So the effect he sees isn't necessarily caused by his actions, it's just things naturally moving back towards the average.
Precisely. Regression is a statistical phenomenon, not necessarily a causal one. And it happens whenever the correlation between two things isn't perfect.
Correlation and regression are linked then. Two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. Galton's insight. If two variables are correlated but not perfectly, correlation less than one, the extreme values on one variable will correspond, on average, to less extreme values on the other. That's regression.
How does this mess up our intuitive predictions? Like with Julie, the early reader.
We predict based on representativeness or matching intensity. Julie reads fluently at age 4. Our intuition, System 1, WYSII, jumps to predicting a top college GPA. We match the intensity. Exceptional early reading predicts exceptional later performance.
Without considering regression. That her GPA is likely to be good, but probably closer to the average than her early reading skill was extreme.
Exactly. Intuitive predictions often ignore regression. Corrected predictions would moderate the forecast, pulling it towards the average based on the imperfect correlation between early reading and college GPA. Uncorrected predictions are too extreme.
And this leads to the illusion of validity. Feeling confident in predictions even when the evidence is weak.
Yeah.
Like interviewers being sure they can pick the right candidate.
Yes. Our confidence often reflects the coherence of the story we build from the input, WYSIAD, representativeness, not the actual predictive quality of that input. We feel certain because the prediction fits the description, even if we know, intellectually, that interviews aren't perfectly predictive or the information is flimsy. That unwarranted confidence is the illusion of validity.
It's hard to shake that feeling of certainty. Now, looking back, there's hindsight bias, the I knew it all along effect. Fishoff's Nixon study.
Right. Before Nixon's trips to China and Russia, people made predictions about outcomes. After the trips, when outcomes were known, people recalled their original predictions as being much closer to what actually happened than they really were.
So knowing the outcome biases, our memory of what we thought before,
Yeah.
makes the past seem inevitable.
Exactly. It makes events seem far more predictable in retrospect. And this is pernicious because it leads to outcome bias when judging past decisions.
Outcome bias. Judging a decision purely by how it turned out.
Yes. We assess the quality of a decision based on whether the outcome was good or bad, rather than whether the decision was reasonable given the information available at the time. A good decision can have a bad outcome due to bad luck, and vice versa. Hindsight makes it hard to judge fairly.
We also tend towards an illusion of control, especially in complex areas like business, right? Overestimating predictability.
Definitely. Even if there's only a modest correlation, say 0.30 between CEO quality and company success, meaning the better CEO leads the more successful firm, only 60% of the time we tend to act as if the link is much stronger. We underestimate the huge role of luck and circumstances.
We want clear stories of heroic leadership, not messy randomness. Studies showing excellent companies often just regress to the mean over time challenge that narrative.
They do. We crave causal explanations and find it hard to accept how much is down to chance, especially when evaluating success and failure.
This extends to experts too, right? The illusion of skill among pundits or stock pickers, the nuclear plant simulation.
Yes, the simulation example was telling. Even knowing the overall predictive accuracy was low, the participants felt confident in each specific prediction they made. The illusion of validity struck again. Similarly, many investors believe they can beat the market despite strong evidence against it. The complexity feels like skill is possible, but often it's just noise.
Nassim Taleb's narrative fallacy fits here. We make coherent stories about the past that make the future seem more forecastable than it is.
Precisely. Hindsight makes the past look orderly, feeding the illusion that the future will be too. Pundits thrive on this.
What about algorithms versus experts? Statistical versus clinical prediction.
Yeah.
Meals work.
Paul Meal's work was groundbreaking. He compared predictions made by human experts, clinicians, psychologists, with predictions made by simple statistical formulas across dozens of domains: academic success, job performance, parole violation, marital stability.
And the formula is often one.
Surprisingly often, yes. Simple algorithms, sometimes just giving equal weight to a few key predictors, frequently outperformed expert judgment. Experts are inconsistent, prone to biases. Algorithms are consistent. The APGAR score for newborns is a great real-world example of a simple, effective algorithm.
But intuition can be valuable sometimes. Kahneman and Klein disagreed slightly.
They did. Klein studied experts in fields where patterns are stable and feedback is quick and clear: firefighters, nurses, chess masters. In those domains, intuition, pattern recognition, can be highly reliable. Kahneman focused more on areas with lower validity and more pseudo-experts: long-term political forecasting, stock picking, where subjective confidence is often misleadingly high.
So the key is whether the environment is predictable enough and provides good feedback for learning.
That seems to be the crucial factor for developing trustworthy intuitive expertise. True experts also know the limits of their knowledge.
Okay, let's shift to planning. The planning fallacy. We're terrible at estimating time and costs. The curriculum project example.
Ah, yes, the story of planning a curriculum project. The team made optimistic estimates, completely ignoring Seymour's data about how long similar projects actually took and how many failed. That's the planning fallacy in action.
We focus on our specific plan, our best case scenario, the inside view.
Exactly. We underestimate the potential obstacles, delays, costs, and risks while overestimating the benefits. We neglect the outside view, the statistical track record of similar endeavors. Optimism often fuels this, along with perhaps wanting the plan approved.
So the cure is to actively seek out that outside view. Look at the data for similar projects. Ben Fleibjerg's advice.
Yes, using distributional information from comparable past ventures is the recommended antidote. It anchors the forecast in reality rather than optimistic hopes.
And this planning fallacy is part of a bigger optimistic bias. We generally see ourselves in our future as better than average.
It seems so. Most people tend to view the world as more benign, their own qualities as more favorable, and their goals as more achievable than reality warrants. Optimism can be good, driving progress, but the bias itself can lead to risky decisions and disappointments. It's a major cognitive bias in terms of impact.
Okay, nearly there. Let's touch on how we value gains and losses.
No.
Bernoulli's theory of utility had a flaw.
Bernoulli focused on the utility of states of wealth, but Kahneman and Tversky realized people don't evaluate outcomes based on absolute levels of wealth, but rather on changes relative to a reference point, gains and losses. That was Bernoulli's error, ignoring the reference point.
Which led to prospect theory. What are its key ideas?
Prospect theory is built around three core psychological principles. 1, evaluation is relative to a neutral reference point, often the status quo. 2, diminishing sensitivity to both gains and losses. The difference between $10 and $20 feels bigger than between $10 and $10 to $20. 3, loss aversion losses hurt psychologically much more than equivalent gains feel good.
Loss aversion. That's a big one. Losses loom larger. How much larger?
Experiments suggest the loss aversion ratio is often around 1.5 to 2.5, meaning a potential loss of $100 feels roughly twice as bad as a potential gain of $100 feels good.
And this explains things like the endowment effect, why we overvalue things we own. The coffee mug study.
Exactly. Owning the mug makes giving it up feel like a loss, which hurts more than the pleasure of potentially acquiring it feels good if you don't own it. So owners demand a higher price to sell than buyers are willing to pay. Loss aversion makes us stickier.
Experienced traders don't show it as much, though.
Right, they learn to overcome it, or it doesn't apply in routine exchanges. but for possessions, it's strong. It also contributes to status quo bias, preferring to keep things as they are because changes involve potential losses.
We also do mental accounting, keeping finances in separate buckets.
Yes, treating money differently depending on where it came from or what it's earmarked for, which can lead to irrational financial behavior.
And framing effects, how the presentation changes choices, survival rates versus mortality rates.
Huge effect. Framing the exact same outcome as a gain, 90% survival rate, versus a loss, 10% mortality rate, can dramatically shift people's preferences, even though the underlying reality is identical. It violates the logical principle of invariance.
Finally, how we remember experiences. The experiencing self versus the remembering self.
Yeah.
The cold hand experiment.
Right. People put their hand in painfully cold water. Some endured a shorter, consistently painful trial. Others endured that same pain plus a slightly longer period where the water warmed up a bit, making the end less painful, even though the total duration of pain was longer.
And people preferred the longer trial with the better ending.
Yes, when choosing which one to repeat. Their memory of the experience was dominated by the peak intensity of pain and how it felt at the very end. The duration was largely ignored, duration neglect, and the peak end rule.
So the remembering self, which makes decisions, doesn't accurately represent what the experiencing self actually went through moment by moment.
Exactly. Our remembered utility can be quite different from our experienced utility. This has implications for everything from medical procedures to vacation planning. We choose based on anticipated memories, which are shaped by peak and end.
And the focusing illusion pops up again when judging well-being. Thinking about one aspect makes it seem all-important.
Yes. Asking people about their climate might make Californians seem happier overall because people focus on that one positive aspect if they like the climate, exaggerating its importance in their global evaluation. Whatever you focus on seems critical to your well-being at that moment.
So we have these two selves, the one living life, the one telling the story, and they don't always align, leading to potentially conflicting choices about well-being.
That's a key tension highlighted at the end. Which self's happiness should we prioritize? The moment-to-moment experience or the overall life evaluation? Prospect theory and the study of the two selves offer a much richer, more complex picture of decision-making and happiness than older models.
Wow. Okay, that's been an incredible journey through our mental landscape. We've covered so much, the two systems, biases like availability, representativeness, anchoring, hindsight, the influence of framing, memory, emotion.
It's a lot, but hopefully, breaking it down this way provides that shortcut, those aha moments, making these powerful psychological ideas more accessible. That was the aim of this deep dive.
Absolutely. We really hope this exploration has given you, our listeners, some valuable tools for understanding your own thinking and the decisions you make.
And hopefully it was clear and engaging without feeling like a lecture.
Definitely. So here's a final thought to leave you with. Now that you're more aware of these biases, these mental shortcuts and illusions, how might that change how you approach decisions, both personally and professionally? Think about how these forces might be shaping your judgments and perhaps the judgments of others around you.
It's definitely food for thought, an area worth continuing to explore.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.